tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1st and rise to 25% by June. European leaders have rejected the demand, warning it could damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tensions. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tabqa and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF has accused the army of violating the withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has accused President Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei has called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. EU and Mercosur leaders have signed a landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the EU's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the EU with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Trisha Shimamura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani has praised Shimamura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimamura has called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. Syria's Communications Minister Abdul Salam Haikal said internet users can now access the Google Play Store without a VPN and that most Google services are expected to return to Syria soon. The restoration follows the removal of Syria from the US Treasury's OFAC sanctions list last year. According to a DOJ letter filed with Judge Paul Engelmeyer, the U.S. Justice Department has urged a New York federal judge to reject lawmakers Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's push for a special master to oversee the release of Jeffrey Epstein-related files. Now for this hour, we start with Europe. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has warned that a U.S. military intervention in Greenland would greatly benefit Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a recent interview, Sanchez has emphasized that such an action would weaken NATO, potentially legitimizing Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This comes amid escalating tensions between the U.S. and European allies over President Donald Trump's decision to impose a 10% tariff on goods from 8 European nations. They include Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, and the Netherlands, Finland, and the United Kingdom. Trump's tariffs, which are set to take effect on February 1st, are part of his pressure campaign for the U.S. to gain control over Greenland. In response to the European Union has strongly condemned the move, with leaders from France, Sweden, Germany, and Finland expressing solidarity with Denmark and Greenland. The European leaders have also warned that such actions could harm transatlantic relations, further risking instability in the Arctic region. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Veselin Popowski. He's a professor and vice dean at Jindal Global Law School, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, as tensions escalate, what do you think could have been Trump's motive? And also him bringing tariffs once again into this equation.
Well, difficult to say what are his motives. Maybe Donald Trump doesn't know what these motives are. He talks various things every day, changes his mind. Yes, it was the same erratic behavior during his first term. He was talking about building a wall with Mexico, and Mexico will pay for that. he likes talking and making scandals all his term, but again, difficult to comment on someone who is so insane as to comment on. But basically, Greenland is approximate territory to United States. It is a route to the Arctic Sea. One can see some national interest there. But this is the territory of Denmark, of another sovereign country, member of NATO, member of European Union. So those talks are talks. I'm sure even if the U.S. military invades Greenland, the U.S. Congress will never recognize that as a territory of United States. It's not Donald Trump. There are congressmen, there are generals in United States. There are reasonable people in that big country called United States, and they will not allow Donald Trump to do that. Not the Europeans and not nobody else. So yeah, it's a comedy or tragedy. You call it as you want, but
Yes.
it's something to watch. It's scandal. It's on the first page of the news. Greenland and U.S. appetites. I don't see this happening. First of all, logistically, because it's a member of NATO, and all other 30 members of NATO are totally against that. But also inside the United States, there are reasonable voices not to do that. And these are the generals, even the Republicans. Half of the Republicans will be against that. And Donald Trump, sooner or later, will realize this himself and will stop talking about Greenland.
Thank you for highlighting that. And, how do you see European leaders, including the latest one from Spanish Prime Minister, condemning that, right? Do you think, can they actually do anything to counter US's, yes?
These are very usual reactions. As I said, every reasonable leader is against that. And all European leaders are reasonable, and they see that as absolute violation of international law, an absolute nightmarish idea by Donald Trump, and they properly react. They say this is against the law, this is against the commitment of all the US presidents to NATO and to the European security. They are united in condemning Donald Trump in his approach to Greenland. I wouldn't call this as a good news for Putin, the happiest news for Putin, what the Spanish Prime Minister said. There is also no happy news for Putin anywhere, because he doesn't legitimize his action in Ukraine whatsoever. Two wrongs do not make it right. Even if Donald Trump invade another country, that does not justify anything that Putin does. It basically just distracts the attention of the global media from what does Putin do in Ukraine. So for that matter, it's a bit of a incorrect statement that Putin will be happy about the US invasion in Greenland. Nothing will make Putin happy, and nothing will make Donald Trump happy, because these two usurps the power and they do aggressive acts, and none of those will succeed long term. So both of them will be remembered as the aggressors of the 2020s, and nothing more than that. Dictatorial presidents without any respect for law, not even domestic law, not only international law. So for Putin and Trump, the judgment of the history is very similar, and it will be delivered very soon, I hope.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And, building on that, do you think there can actually be realistically any cards that European countries can play to counter that,
Yes.
from Trump?
Yes, there will. Absolutely. There is Article 5 of the NATO agreement, which is very clear that any country that is under military attack is considered to be a military attack to all other members of NATO. Yes, I think United States cannot do much in Greenland, exactly because Denmark is a member of NATO, and with all support of the rest of the European countries. They can do counterattacks. There are American troops in Europe. The Europeans can simply block any intelligence and any American troops movement in Europe. They can block the US bases in Europe. They can retaliate if necessary. And US will suffer much more from that retaliation rather than to gain anything significant in Greenland. And I'm sure the American generals realize that. I'm sure no single reasonable American military will do anything in Greenland, despite the idiotic idea of Donald Trump. So it's a comedy, as I said, to watch. But at some point, I'm sure it will be simply forgotten because that idea will fade away and other news will be, more important news will come on.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that, Professor. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Russia-Ukraine. Ukraine says that 2 people have been killed and dozens wounded in a major Russian drone assault overnight. President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the attack involved more than 200 drones. He said multiple regions were hit. They include Sumy, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhia, Khmelnytsky, and Odessa. These strikes mark one of the largest drone attacks in recent weeks as fighting continues across Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukraine's peace negotiators have arrived in the United States for talks on ending the war with Russia. The delegation is meeting senior U.S. officials, including White House envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and U.S. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll. The visit comes as President Volodymyr Zelensky says draft documents for a U.S.-Ukraine deal could be signed at the Davos Forum. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Professor Veselin Popovsky. He joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Professor, for staying with us. Now, first of all, how significant is this upcoming, meeting, as they are saying that they might, the U.S.-Ukraine deal might be signed over here? And also, what do you think about the delegation in particular who have been sent from Ukraine's side for this discussion or for these talks to U.S.?
Yes, it shows the seriousness of the approach of the Ukrainians. They continue, despite the strikes you just mentioned and the 2 persons being killed. Well, it's very clear what Russia does. Russia continues targeting civilians and killing civilians in Ukraine every week, every day. And that's what makes the only good news for Putin if he wakes up and finds out that another 2 civilians are dead in Ukraine. There is no other good news for Vladimir Putin apart from killing civilians in Ukraine. But on the other side, we have a very serious delegation. Ukraine wants peace. They want to meet to anybody who wants peace. They are sending a delegation. They want to discuss all the 20 points of the peace plan. They are happy to cooperate. They are hoping that United States diplomats will help Ukraine by delivering the right message to Vladimir Putin to stop this useless war, which made life miserable, not only for Ukraine, but also for Russia. Russia lost 1 million soldiers already in a massive bloodshed unseen in the years after the Second World War. So for that matter, Ukraine is serious. They want to negotiate peace. They want a ceasefire. They are happy to compromise even. They mentioned they are happy not to join NATO as one compromise, for example. And they are happy to have a ceasefire on the line of the contact of the 2 armies, even to withdraw 20-kilometer siege. Russians and Ukrainians withdraw. They create this neutral economic zone without soldiers, both sides. Excellent proposal, by the way. And I wonder why Russia is silent on that. What do they want? Why not an economic zone between Ukraine and Russia without soldiers? That plays to the Russian national interest. But again and again, we see silence from Moscow, silence from Kremlin. They just want to continue killing civilians. That's the only thing Russia can do.
Thank you, as always, Professor, for joining us and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Now we move the focus on to Germany. Protesters gathered in Berlin after an alliance called for fairer producer prices, species appropriate animal husbandry and climate justice. The large-scale demonstrations is part of the Green Week Agriculture and Food Fair in Berlin. According to police, around 2,800 people took part in the large-scale demonstrations entitled "We've Had Enough," while organizers claimed attendance of up to 8,000 people. Let's listen into what some protesters have shared.
Wir wissen, wie gute Lebensmittel produziert werden, wir wissen, wie artgerechte Tierhaltung funktioniert, wir wissen, wie Märkte funktionieren. Wir brauchen einfach eine Diskussion auf Augenhöhe und dass der Handel, der Discounter, der Lebensmitteleinzelhandel, die ja letztendlich unsere Ware ja verkaufen, auch so verkauft, dass es ihren Preis wert ist. Und es ist keinem geholfen, dass wir da nicht von leben können.
Wir haben trotzdem das Problem, dass wir eigentlich genug Tierhaltung haben, die auch nachhaltig geführt werden kann. Und gerade auf großen Flächen, wie in Deutschland, wo viel Grünland ist, da braucht es die Tierhaltung, um die nachhaltig im Betrieb zu haben. Und gerade die Kreislaufwirtschaft hat immer das Tier im Mittelpunkt. Also dass die unseren Dung herstellen, den wir auf die Flächen ausbringen. Und so ist es am besten. Wir wollen ja nicht abhängig sein von irgendwelchen Düngemittelherstellern, die synthetischen Dünger produzieren, wo sie so und so entscheiden können, wie wir den Preis hochtreiben. Und am Ende hat der Landwirt wieder keine Mitsprache. Überhaupt nicht.
Genau, also eine konkrete Forderung ist ja, dass wenn wir mit Import und Export, also einem Weltmarkt agieren, dass wir sagen, wir wollen dann auch gleiche Bedingungen. Und das zerstört natürlich Betriebe, sowohl wenn wir zu anderen Bedingungen produzieren als in anderen Ländern, wo wir hin exportieren, als auch umgekehrt. Generell zerstört das lokale Märkte. Und das muss bei so Abkommen besser vereinbart werden.
Now for this discussion, we welcome retired Major General A.K. Sivachi. He is a geostrategic expert, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Major General, for joining us. Good to see you. Now looking at this, what does this demonstration reveal and how might these protests influence the current party positions and debates ahead of upcoming elections for Germany?
You know, as far as Germany is concerned, the farmer agitation is becoming an issue, even in the election, because the problem is that this is not the first time the farmers are come on the road. They have now basically come into Berlin. It has happened earlier in 2024, 2025, because the point is that the hardship which the farmers are feeling is hurting them. And that is basically they are not getting sort of subsidies in agriculture products. They are not getting basically a sort of cheap fertilizer. Their products are not being sold because the prices are higher. And the agreement which has taken place very recently, the Mercosur agreement which has taken place between European Union and also the Latin American countries, that is hurting, because you find those items which are cheaper and produced in Latin America will flood the market of European Union. And this is not restricted to only Germany, it is also happening in France. And they are feeling it if this happens, if this agreement goes through, you will find that majority of European Union market will be flooded with Latin American products, especially on agriculture goods. And that is going to hurt them. So overall, this, what the farmers are agitating is that their living conditions become poor, their survival is become very difficult, and they are not getting any support from the government. The subsidy which they used to get it is been also cut, and especially about the something like fertilizer and all, that has reduced considerably. So as on today, they are not earning much, and they are feeling the heat of it. And on top of that, this agreement which is signed between European Union and the Latin America, that will hurt them more, because in the sense the agriculture products will flood the market in European Union, and it will become much more difficult for the farmers in European Union, and especially Germany, France, to sell their products, because they will not become that competitive. And that's what hurting them, and that's why the farmers are on agitation, and the farmers have brought their tractors and all, they are blocking the roads. And it is not only restricted to Germany, it is also come in France. So overall, the government has to take care of it, and especially when the elections are going to take place, it will make a tremendous impact, because this is what today farmers are feeling aggrieved, and this agitation is very, very genuine, and it looks that this will make a difference. And let's see how the government take it. Will the government give them further subsidies? Will the government bow down, or the government will stick to their own line of thought? That time will only tell. But certainly the farmers are agitated, and that's why they are on the road now.
Right. Thank you very much for sharing that insight. Major General Kyiv, please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Ethiopia, the International Monetary Fund has approved a new disbursement of $261 million for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of the country's 48-month extended credit facility. The money will be helping Ethiopia cover its balance of payments and budget needs, bringing total IMF disbursement under the program to just over $2.818 billion. According to the IMF, Ethiopia's economy is performing better than expected, with strong growth, higher exports, improved revenue collection, and rising foreign reserves, while inflation continues to ease. The ECF program, worth about $3.4 billion in total, is designed to support Ethiopia's homegrown economic reform agenda, which aims to correct macroeconomic imbalances and lay the groundwork for private sector-led growth. Now, for this discussion, we welcome back retired Major General Kyiv. Thank you very much, Major General, for staying with us. Now, what does this latest IMF's disbursement for Ethiopia signal about international confidence in their political and economic reform agenda? Also, how might this continued IMF support or affect Ethiopia?
As for Ethiopia, the IMF loan which has been given, in fact, the credit extended facility which has been given for 4 years, that has proved to be very, very effective. Now, the latest which they have released, one of the installment of $260 million. The IMF team has been extremely happy in the way things have unfolded in Ethiopia. One is that the inflation has come down. Second thing is they have increased to some extent the tax revenue base. Then another thing which has happened is you find foreign reserve have also increased. Unemployment has also reduced considerably. So overall, the IMF loan which was given to Ethiopia, it is making a difference, and it is making a difference for good. And it has surprised the IMF, because the type of progress which is now seen in Ethiopia by giving this IMF fund is creditable, much more than their expectation. And they are saying that Ethiopia must continue on the recovery path, and they have already now released $260 million. And especially what they are trying to convey is that all other parameters have been met in a very positive manner, especially increasing the base of budget. But they want that the tax budget base should increase further. That is where the more people should come into the bracket of the tax. As far as other parameters are concerned, they are very positive. The inflation has gone down, the foreign reserve has increased, unemployment is gone down. There is more economic activity taking place in the country. The industry is doing considerably okay. So overall, it is a story of a success. Ethiopia seemingly looks to be on a recovery path, and you find it that the IMF loan which has been given to Ethiopia has been used properly, and it is now showing the result in a positive manner, and it has surprised the official of IMF that the results are very encouraging, and they are very hopeful that Ethiopia will keep on progressing well and do a development in a positive manner, and all these parameters which are positive, they will further increase, and the tax revenue and tax base has to increase. I am sure Ethiopia is working on that, but overall a very positive report which has been given by IMF while releasing this $260 million package to Ethiopia.
So, Major General, thank you very much for laying that positive side and benefits for Ethiopia out here. But how does this IMF loan conditions, deepen Ethiopia's economic dependence and limit its ability to pursue independent development policies and long-term economic sovereignty?
The point is that when you get an IMF loan, then you have to follow certain guidelines which are given by IMF. Why these IMF guidelines are given? They are given in a manner that you become self-confident and self-sufficient. It should not happen. The loans which are given by IMF, you will not able to repay back because you are giving subsidies to your people. To an extent, your economy is not growing up. In Ethiopia, whatever about the restriction which was imposed by IMF, the guidelines which were given by IMF has been followed by Ethiopia, and this is making a difference on ground, where you find the foreign reserve of Ethiopia has increased, the inflation has come down, the unemployment has also reduced to quite a bit level, and the economic activities have increased, and you find that investment is also coming in Ethiopia from the foreign country. The export has increased, and the imports are now by and large stagnant. So all these are positive signs, and why IMF put this restriction is that a country should able to come out of that economic distress in which it is, and thereafter in long run it becomes self-sufficient. I think Ethiopia to that extent is showing all positive results, and that's why IMF is extremely happy, and they have given this 4 years of extended fund facility by IMF, and now they have released this $261 million in overall loan, which is approximately $6 to $8 billion. They are just saying that yes, Ethiopia is on the right track. However, what they need to do is they follow the same, but the base of people giving tax has to be increased, and restrictions which have been imposed by IMF must continue, and the way things are progressing, it is a positive sign that Ethiopia looks to be on a path of recovery.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Major General A.K. Sivachi for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout our news. Now we move on to South Korea. South Korea says it will seek favorable treatment under U.S. tariffs on imported memory chips. The presidential office has said that a prior trade agreement with Washington ensures South Korea should not face worse terms than key competitors. The comments follow a new U.S. move targeting artificial intelligence chips. South Korea's trade minister says the impact on local firms will be limited. Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix, two of the world's largest memory chip makers, are closely watching the outcome. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. Yes, President Donald Trump has threatened escalating tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1st and rise to 25% by June. European leaders have rejected the demand, warning it could damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tensions. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tapka and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF has accused the army of violating a withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has accused President Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei has called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. EU and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the EU's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the EU with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Tricia Shimamura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani has praised Shimamura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimamura has called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to official results reported by Ugandan media, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has won a seventh term, 71.65% of the vote, defeating opposition challenger Bobi Wine, who won 24.70%. Wine is expected to reject the outcome, alleging an unfair election marred by an internet shutdown as tensions remain high following protests and security crackdowns. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. Elon Musk is demanding up to $134 billion from OpenAI and Microsoft, claiming they profited from his early funding and support the companies, called the claim baseless as the case heads to trial in April. Schools in Iran are expected to reopen soon after a week of closure caused by nationwide protests. The ISNA news agency reports that schools in Tehran and other cities will be resuming, while postponed university exams will be held on January 24th. Meanwhile, Iranian opposition supporters rallied in Germany's Frankfurt, demanding the return of Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah. Chanting for a new era of democracy, protesters called for the removal of the Islamic Republic's leadership. The rally in Germany also came with a message for waiting for American support, which has yet to materialize. Let's listen in to what spokesperson for the Kingdom of Iran Association has shared.
Und wenn das Islamische Republik weg ist, wenn das Pahlavi-Dynastie oder Freiheit, Demokratie wieder zurück nach Iran kehrt. Wir können alle zusammenleben ohne Probleme mit jedem Nachbarländer, mit Israel, mit den arabischen Ländern, mit den ganzen westlichen, alles können.
Moreover, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has also showed her solidarity with the Iranian people, condemning the Iranian regime's violence against demonstrators. She has called for a return to diplomatic negotiations to resolve the situation, particularly on the nuclear issue. Let's listen in.
Io ritengo che la questione del rafforzamento della sicurezza e della presenza degli alleati in Groenlandia sia un tema serio, che però sta nell'ambito della del dialogo all'interno dell'Alleanza Atlantica, cioè la Groenlandia va considerato territorio, diciamo così, di responsabilità della NATO. La questione che gli americani pongono è una questione seria, ovviamente, e credo che diciamo, il ragionamento di rafforzare la nostra presenza sia un ragionamento sicuramente necessario da fare all'interno dell'Alleanza Atlantica, ma credo che quello però sia l'ambito nel quale discutere questa materia, anche per quello che eventualmente riguarda insomma, la nostra presenza. Voi avete visto che l'Italia ha presentato una sua strategia per l'Artico, perché anche noi comprendiamo ovviamente quanto sia strategico e quanto sia importante. Io ho già proposto che se ne...
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He's an Israeli intelligence and security expert, joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
Now, looking at this, can you tell us if Iran's situation, is it de-escalating if schools are reopening? What can we make of this situation right now?
Well, of course, the Iranian regime wants to create the impression that things are going to be calm from now on, and that they have managed to cope successfully with the riots and the demonstrations. But we all understand that this is it's an image that doesn't represent correctly what's going on in Iran right now. Because we have so many people killed and so many people injured. Nobody knows the exact numbers, but huge numbers of people killed and injured. And the protest is not dead yet. And much depends on what decision the President of the United States is going to take regarding the next move. It seems that at this point, because the Iranians have decided not to execute some of the protesters, then the president has decided to postpone action, but he didn't decide to give it up altogether, and we're waiting to see what's next for him.
Right. And, what do you think Reza Pahlavi is trying to achieve here by making a lot of statements public? And do you know if anything about his popularity or his approval in Iran?
Well, first of all, I think that the next move of President Trump is to find a new leadership for Iran, as he said in his interview to Politico. So definitely Pahlavi is one of the candidates for this new leadership. But there's a question mark regarding how popular he is. He's definitely more popular than any other single leader of the Iranian opposition. But is he popular enough in order to lead the opposition and to form a unity amongst the opposition? I don't think so, definitely not at this stage. We haven't seen the other leaders of the opposition saying that they are ready to cooperate with him. And it's too early to know what's the situation inside Iran, because we hear people shouting in favor of the Shah, in favor of the Reza Pahlavi, but you cannot tell what percentage of the population they represent. So it's we have to keep looking at the situation, and I believe that eventually this protest would give birth to new leaders that would represent the Iranian people and enjoy a large support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for sharing that insight. Now we move on to Israel. Israel has stated that it objected to the lineup of the Palestinian Committee of Technocrats meant to govern post-war Gaza, which began its work in Cairo this week. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said that the composition of a Gaza executive board was not coordinated with Israel and ran counter to government policy. It said Foreign Minister Gideon Saar would raise the issue with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad has also criticized the composition of the Board of Peace set to oversee the governance in Gaza, saying it served Israel's interests. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been invited by U.S. President Donald Trump to join the board, reportedly an offer he intends to accept. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Yossi Cooper-Wasser. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper-Wasser, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, can you tell me what exactly is the problem here with this Palestinian Committee of Technocrats?
Well, First of all, it was not coordinated with Israel. That's the first problem. Secondly, some of them are members of or had past membership in the Palestinian Authority bodies. And Israel has made it clear that nobody who belongs to the Palestinian Authority can take part in this new technocratic government of Gaza. So I think that Israel is a little bit upset with the way it was established and with the identity of some of the members. In general, the idea of moving forward towards having this technocratic government is a positive move, even in the view of Israel. But the names of some of the people, including the guy who was in top of this committee, this government, Ali Shaf, who used to be a deputy minister in the Palestinian Authority, is a source of concern for Israel because we want to see technocrats, not politicians. And Shaf and some of the others are technocrats and politicians at the same time. So I think this is what concerns Israel. The other thing that concerns Israel is not necessarily this technocratic government, but the committee that was established in order to oversee its activities on behalf of the Board of Peace, led by President Trump himself. And some of the figures over there are against the interest of Israel, for example, the Turkish Minister of Foreign Affairs, Hakan Fidan, and the guy that represents the Qataris. So we want to make sure that Turkey is not involved in the activities that are going to take place in Gaza in the future. We can maybe survive with having some Turkish figure in this committee, but the seniority of Hakan Fidan, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, is problematic. And we definitely don't want to see Turkish forces deployed inside the Gaza in the context of the international stabilization force that is supposed to keep security and stability of Gaza after Hamas is disarmed. And besides, we are very concerned that all of that is happening before Hamas has been disarmed. We think that the most important thing right now is to disarm Hamas. So all of these organizations can act without having to confront Hamas and can bring stability and prosperity to Gaza. As long as Hamas is not disarmed, Hamas is in fact ruling Gaza, and that's what's happening on the ground. We have to see Hamas disarmed.
Right. And a lot of things are still under the wraps about Palestinian Committee of Technocrats, but what do we know so far, if you can share with us?
No, we know the names. We know some of them were generals in the Palestinian Authority security forces. Some of them were in the Palestinian Authority government in the past. And all of them were born in Gaza, that's true. Not all of them live in Gaza. And we have to make sure that this group of people, some of them are not fond, even Palestinian Islamic Jihad is not fond of them. They want to see them replaced because they don't think they are supportive enough of Hamas and Islamic Jihad. But some of them are accepted by Hamas, and if they are accepted by Hamas, this is not acceptable for us. And we think that the process of nominating them should have been coordinated with us, and it was not done properly. That's why Israel is upset.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Kupa Russell for joining us today and sharing that insight from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much. Now we move on to US. US President Donald Trump has denied offering JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon the role of Federal Reserve Chair, contradicting a Wall Street Journal report earlier this week. The report suggested that Trump made the offer, which Dimon reportedly treated as a joke. Trump made the denial in a post on Truth Social and emphasized that he never approached Dimon or the position. In the same post, Trump said he plans to sue JP Morgan over allegedly debanking him, following the January 6 Capitol attack. However, Dimon has also confirmed that he was not asked to take the Fed job. Earlier this week, Trump suggested he might nominate either White House economic advisor Kevin Hassett or former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh to replace Jerome Powell. Now for this discussion, we welcome Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining us. Good to see you. Now looking at this, can you tell us a little bit more about this situation with, alleged offering of the position of Fed Chair to Jamie Dimon?
There is a rift between the president and the top of the FRB, so that's why who will be the alternative candidate or the top of the FRB is always a problem. But at the same time, in case of the Jamie Dimon of the JP Morgan, Mr. Dimon clearly supports independence of the FRB. And politically, this remark is people can understand as criticize against President Trump's involvement in the FRB policy. So that's why the view from the President Trump, his remark was a little bit controversial. And so that's why even if Mr. Dimon said there's a possibility he will cooperate or he will join the Trump administration, there's a few possibility that he will be the FRB, top of FRB. And in case of the Mr. Dimon himself, they clearly indicated that there is no possibility to be the top of the FRB. So that's why indeed President Trump's remark and Mr. Dimon's remark is matched in this case. Both said Mr. Dimon will not become the top of the FRB.
And, what legacy, in particular to Jerome Powell, what legacy does he leave behind as he leaves this position? And what are the challenges are to be faced by the replacement?
Legacy is, of course, Mr. Powell's legacy, if you want to say. But if Mr. Dimon sworn in, of course, like Mr. Powell, he would support independent of the FRB. So the federal government cannot intervene so much about policy. But indeed, view from the policy side, which is the White House, they want to move the FRB as a part of the policy of the government. So that's why not only the Trump administration, but also the other administration face the same problem. Independence of the FRB is easy to violate by the government, and this is always controversial as a policy of the government. That is indeed a destiny. And in case of the Mr. Dimon, clearly pointed out this aspect, so repeatedly. So that's why Mr. Dimon's, if the legacy of the Mr. Powell of the predecessor, Mr. Dimon also support independence of FRB is one kind of legacy, I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nagao, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving on to Africa, Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has been declared the winner of Uganda's election, extending his 4 decades in power by another 5 years. According to the Election Commission, he gained 72% of the vote against 25% for his closest challenger, Bobi Wine, who has condemned what he described as fake results and ballot stuffing. Wine has not provided any details, and the authorities have not responded to his allegations, but African Union election observers say that they saw no evidence of ballot stuffing. The election process was marred by violence, and Wine, a 43-year-old former pop star, says that at least 21 people have been killed around the country in recent days. Meanwhile, people in Kampala are celebrating after President Yoweri Museveni's 7th-term win in the office. Let's listen into what some of his supporters have shared.
I'm really very happy and glad seeing that for this time he has won at a higher percentage even compared to what he won with last time. And this victory comes because of his hard work and dedication and commitment towards the people of Uganda. He's a man who loves his country in a way that he promotes peace. He gives everyone freedom to do whatever he wants. Uganda is a country where anybody can engage in any business and he gets an income of how to earn a what. He has given freedom of speech, of worship, of interaction. A person in Uganda is free to do everything that he wants at any particular time, in any particular place. So he's a person worthy of being voted for. So I am very happy, very excited, seeing that we are now jubilating for his success. I want him to even reign more until he is exhausted.
President Yoweri Museveni is a good leader for 35 years. Since I was born, I've never seen wars in Uganda, and he has brought peace in Uganda. He has built houses. For all people have become rich, and all women, they have peace of work. All of them, they are working.
Now for this discussion, we welcome back Dr. Satoru Nagao. He's a fellow at Hudson Institute, joins us live from Tokyo. Thank you very much, Mr. Nagao, for staying with us. Now, looking at these elections, how come this, Mr. Museveni has been in power for this long, and even the support of this election with 72% of the votes? What can you tell us more about this?
It was true that Mr. Museveni contribute and the insecure situation in Uganda, except northern area. So that's why he has the skill. That was true, but at the same time, it is unnatural if the same leader continue to stay more than 40 years. In case of the Museveni, his government has started in the 1986. And so now the 40 years he stay, and his age itself is 81 years old. So that's why the view from such kind of the number, still he has 70% vote is unnatural, because long-term tenure that he has. In this case, when he sworn in, the people compare with the current government and the previous government. In this case, if the previous government will be completely opposite or completely different, in this case, Mr. Museveni's new government's image is quite fresh and new, and people expect he will work well. But if he continue more than 40 years, when the election has happened, people's comparison is current Museveni and past Museveni. So that's why he need to fight with him in the past, and generally what he has done in the past is more fresh and new compared with the current same politician. So that's why if he can continue president for 40 years and 7 times there is election, is this election fair election? People doubt it. And this time, in case of the election, he cut internet connection, or sometimes the opposition party's meeting was disrupted by the police forces. So that's why this is not fair election. In this case, Museveni said he got more than 70% support, but it is clearly that doubtful election, not fair election could happen based on such kind of activities, based on such kind of long-term government.
With that, I would like to thank Dr. Satoru Nagao for joining us today and sharing that insight with us on NewsX World. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our science news. Scientists have created the most detailed map yet of Antarctica's hidden landscape beneath its ice sheet. The new map reveals mountains, valleys, canyons, plains, and over 30,000 previously uncharted hills. Researchers used high-resolution satellites and ice flow analysis to map the full continent, including previously unexplored areas. Understanding the subglacial terrain is crucial for predicting how the ice sheet may retreat and raise global sea levels. Antarctica's ice holds about 70% of the planet's fresh water. The study shows the continent's hidden features are as varied as those in Europe, North America, and Greenland. Experts hope that the map will improve climate models and guide future field surveys. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump threatened escalating tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1 and rise to 25% by June. European leaders rejected the demand, warning it could damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tensions. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tabqa and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF accused the army of violating a withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei accused President Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. European Union and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the European Union's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the European Union with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Tricia Shimamura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani praised Shimamura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimamura called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $261 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. Syria's communications minister Abdul Salam Haikal said internet users can now access the Google Play Store without a VPN and that most Google services are expected to return to Syria soon. The restoration follows the removal of Syria from the US Treasury's off-air sanctions last year. According to a Department of Justice letter filed with Judge Paul Engelmeyer, the U.S. Justice Department has urged a New York federal judge to reject lawmakers Ro Khanna and Thomas Massey's push for a special master to oversee the release of Jeffrey Epstein-related files. All right, viewers, let's start with news now from Greenland, which has commended the swift and strong reactions from European countries targeted by U.S. President Donald Trump's new tariff threats. In a LinkedIn post, a minister from the region stated that she is amazed to witness the first responses from the targeted countries, adding that she was thankful and hopeful for diplomacy and allyship to prevail. This came after Trump threatened to impose tariffs on imports from 8 European nations that send troops to Greenland, a Danish territory Trump has expressed interest in controlling. Trump's announcement included a 10% tariff on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland, set to begin on February 1. The tariffs could rise to 25% and remain in place until a deal is reached. Trump emphasized that Greenland is critical to US security and has not ruled out taking control of the territory by force, stating Greenland is of strategic importance to the US. European leaders have widely condemned the tariff threats, calling them unacceptable. Professor Rohan Gunratna, who is an international affairs expert from Singapore, joins me in this discussion. Professor, thanks very much for joining. Professor, what do what does this say about the transatlantic alliance now?
Certainly, the transatlantic alliance faces a very sustained risk of disruption. And what is so important for most Americans and most Europeans and their governments is that they maintain that partnership for the security and stability of the countries across the Atlantic. And if that alliance is disrupted because of Greenland, it will build more insecurity. So I think that most Americans, American congressmen, whether they are Republican or Democrat, they have understood this. And they are opposed to President Trump's view of annexing Greenland. And also most European nations and European public are dismayed and they want to work with the United States, but they oppose this particular position adopted by President Trump. In my personal view, President Trump himself will realize that he should not push his desire to annex Greenland, because that's going to disrupt a very long, close partnership, not only with Europe, but with our eyes, that is the national security arrangement they have with Australia, Canada, with the UK and with New Zealand. So the Five Eyes arrangement itself will be compromised. So it's a question of time that President Trump, I believe, will take a step back. But it needs time and it needs patience, and it also needs the European leaders to work very closely with the Trump administration rather than get disappointed and annoyed and get into a fight.
Sure. Do you see the European nations retaliating if Trump does not stop from these threats?
Europe is a very small entity with limited power compared to the United States. US is a hyperpower. No European country or even a grouping of European countries can come close to the United States. So I think the US best not get into a fight or a conflict or a confrontation with President Trump at this time.
Okay. So what really is a challenge that now faces the European Union other than the tariffs threat?
Europeans should continue to engage the United States, should continue to work with the Congress, should look very closely with President Trump.
Okay, just for you.
Professor, please do continue. Sorry for those interruptions.
So my personal view is that the European nations should continue to work with the national security advisors to President Trump, should work with the US Congress, and should work with President Trump personally, because if they are able to convince him, he will agree. There are many decisions President Trump wanted to take in the past. For example, he wanted to relocate the people in Gaza, but he changed his mind after many leaders convinced him not to do so. Similarly, President Trump wanted to attack the regime in Iran, and that also he changed his mind the last weekend. So I think that President Trump is very theatrical and very triumphant, but sometimes he will review his views and change his position.
All right, sure. Professor, do stay on with me as we proceed. Viewers, U.S. Special Envoy Tom Barrack has met the head of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, Mazloum Abdi, in Erbil in Iraq. The talks come at a tense moment after days of fighting between Syrian government troops and Kurdish forces near Aleppo and along the Euphrates. According to reports, the Syrian army has taken control of the northern city of Tabqa and Kyiv dams. Kurdish authorities say the army breached a withdrawal deal and pushed into areas not covered by the agreement. Meanwhile, the U.S. Central Command has urged Syrian government forces to refrain from attacks in the area between Aleppo and the city of Al-Tabqa in Raqqa province. Request Professor to join me back in this with his first comments.
What we have seen is that Ahmad al-Shara, known as Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, is an Islamist, and he has created a lot of trouble for the Christians, for the Shias, that is the Alawites, and for the Druze, and now he is targeting the Kurds. So it is so important for the European countries, for the Americans, for the Arab world, and other countries to tell him to stop ill-treating the minorities. If he uses his army, which is largely HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the same group that broke away from ISIS to target the Christians, the Druze, the Alawites, and the Kurds. He cannot create a beautiful and a productive country. So a country should be judged by the way it treats its minorities. He has poorly treated all those communities, and he has to come out of his mindset of being an Islamist, of advancing Sharia law, of trying to control those communities. He should create a truly democratic country where there is sufficient space for those minorities, whether they are communities, whether they are ethnic groups or religious groups, to live harmoniously with one another. So if he's not going to do that, I believe even the United States and the Europeans will abandon him, and eventually the Arabs themselves will realize he's not the right man to rule Syria.
Professor, if you allow me one final question before I let you go. How do you see the US role here? Because it's also backing the Syrian government. Then it's also meeting with the Kurdish group, both of these sides. Do you see US rightfully in a position to mediate?
Yes, the US is the only country that can effectively mediate, because the United States has removed the sanctions against Syria. United States invited President Trump invited Ahmad al-Sharaa to the White House. And of course, the United States can lobby other countries and tell them to tell Ahmad Sharaa to behave himself properly. So I believe that US is the most important partner when it comes to disciplining and moderating the conduct of Ahmad al-Sharaa.
All right, then thanks very much, Professor, for joining me in this discussion. Moving ahead now, viewers, let's cover some news from Davos, where hundreds of people marched from Koblenz in southeastern Switzerland to Davos on Saturday, protesting against capitalism, climate change, and the policies of the World Economic Forum, with slogans like democracy rather than WEF dictatorship. Activists called for a more democratic economy. The participation of US President Donald Trump in next week's World Economic Forum meeting made the protest even more relevant, according to organizers. Many participants, including African activist Masa Kuni, slammed the WEF for its role in worsening poverty and inequality worldwide. With half the demonstrators coming from Switzerland and others from Europe and Africa, the march reflected a global discontent with the WEF's decision-making. Anti-Trump sentiments were also strong, with demonstrators calling for Trump to face accountability. Let's listen in.
Uns ist das Anliegen, dass wir eine Gegenstimme sein können gegen das WEF, dass wir aufzeigen können, dass die Entscheidungen, die dort gefällt werden, nicht demokratisch sind, dass dort viele Interessen vertreten werden, die nicht unsere Interessen sind, sondern die von Konzernen, von LobbyistInnen. Und darum finden wir es wichtig, dass wir unseren Protest ins Herz von Davos als WEF tragen können. Ich denke, es gibt uns mehr Druck. Ich denke, es bestätigt das, was wir seit Jahren sagen, was wir davon warnen, für das, was wir einstehen. Trump ist ein Symbol für, in unseren Augen ein Symbol für den Kapitalismus, wie er existiert und von dieser zerstörerischen Natur, die der Kapitalismus auch hat.
All right, I have with me Sharat Kohli, senior economist from New Delhi, joining in this discussion. Thanks very much, sir, for joining me. Firstly, do take our viewers through what these protesters are saying. What are the concerns being raised against the World Economic Forum, a forum that's been going on for years? What now has irked the protesters?
Greetings, Kriti, to you and NewsX World viewers. I think Donald Trump doesn't seem to be a very popular global leader at this point of time. His economic policies, especially the tariffs, he's known more as Donald Tariff than Donald Trump, because there were tariffs levied on Switzerland as well, we all know, and that's why you see these protesters from Switzerland. Well, these two economies, Switzerland and America and so many other countries, they had groomed those relations over so many decades. And suddenly Donald Trump comes and imposes tariffs, disturbing the whole ecosystem of international trade. So I think that's what the protest is, that US is being very selfish. The fact that US has pulled out of 66 organizations around the world, Kriti, out of them 31 UN organizations and 35 non-UN organizations. And these organizations were involved in public welfare. They were involved in charitable work. They were involved in a lot of work which was helping the communities around the world. So the US having pulled out, and World Economic Forum, we should not forget, has been slightly biased, because out of the 3,000 odd delegates coming there from 130 countries, 300 of them are expected from the US. And with President Trump coming as well. So obviously it is the biggest delegation. So there's a lot of say which US has in World Economic Forum. So obviously when there's a bigger delegation, I mean, you have the President of the United States, POTUS for that matter, coming. Obviously, the opinions are going to be biased, because he's not going to allow any counter opinion to come to the fore. And World Economic Forum, I mean, coming from the world of economics, Kriti, I can tell you, World Economic Forum has been more about photo ops, more about discussions, more about symposium being held, sideline talks, but nothing concrete has come out, especially on the climate front.
Yeah.
Especially when the US has pulled out of the climate accords. We all know that US has pulled out of most of the climate accords. So I think there's no point of holding such a major event at an expense when nothing substantial comes out. It just becomes a holiday in the snow, and you get some pictures, you get to meet celebrities, people here and there, a bit of networking, but nothing substantial comes out. The world economy at this point of time, Kriti, is growing at mere 2.5%. A lot of developed economies are on the verge, either they are in recession or they are on the verge of recession. So in such a situation, if World Economic Forum can come out with a solution to pull out the world and the developed part of the world, so-called developed part of the world, from this recessionary trend, I think it will be helpful. Otherwise, this kind of gathering once in a year in snow-clad mountains doesn't really make any sense, except for generating some media attention. As I said, some photo ops, photo shoots, some reels being made here and there. Nothing very
and
substantial.
More than that,
personally.
there are also allegations on the World Economic Forum of, perpetuating inequality, of, giving further push to neoliberal capitalism. What can really be done to address this? Because like you said, many are saying that World Economic Forum is not delivering anything concrete, but just delivering those photo op moments, some leader giving some talks on health, on mental health. But this is an economic forum that we all must remember.
So without sounding racist, Kriti, I must say that World Economic Forum has been dominated by the Western world. So countries coming from the global South, Africa, Southeast Asia, countries coming from a not so prosperous economic background, they are heard. It's not that they are not heard, but then it doesn't get converted to action, as I said. And there's an old saying that actions speak louder than words. So there are a lot of words spoken there, but the focus is on capitalism. The focus is on the growth of how the industry prospers, not how the community prospers. So if you're focusing on how the industry expands, how the business expands, well, it's World Economic Forum. It's not World Industry Forum. So when you use the World Economic Forum, you include industry, businesses, and communities as well. I think communities have been sidelined, and countries from lesser prosperous backgrounds have been sidelined. I got no qualms in saying that, Kriti.
Sure. Okay. As far as Trump is concerned and his threat of tariffs now to the entire world, really, what do you think is really required to tame this bully?
I think he had a very dear friend in NATO, and America was one of the founding members of NATO. and Europe was one of the closest friends of America. But what he's done on Greenland recently, his possessiveness about Greenland, and when he says, I'm going to take it hard way or the soft way, I think this has irked the Scandinavian countries, Denmark and UK, Germany, France, which were closest allies of US. They have deputed their symbolic military in Greenland. And in retaliation, he has declared 10% tariffs on them. So when you can start imposing tariffs on your own friends who've been allies for years and years, I think that speaks volumes that US is trying to alienate itself. US is trying to distance itself. US probably thinks it's coming from some other world. I mean, I'm hesitating to use the word US. I should say President Trump, because he's been trying to distance himself from all the friends that America has made over so many years. And it's a very sad situation when I found that he imposed tariffs on UK. Well, UK has been a yes man of US. They've been saying yes to everything. They were amongst the first to do a trade deal. And with this Greenland, he's now declared 10% tariffs on US, France, Germany. So who's actually US's friend? I think President Trump will have to spell out that who's actually an ally of US. If you ask me, one word answer is no one.
Okay, sure. Mr. Kohli, please to stay on with me as we proceed. We also to bring you some news from South Korea. Now, Presidential Office spokesperson has said that the country will seek favorable terms for US tariffs on imports of memory chips. Last year, South Korea had released a joint fact sheet on its trade deal with the US that included terms ensuring that South Korea will not receive unfavorable treatment from US tariffs on imported chips as compared to key competitors. Meanwhile, South Korean Trade Minister Yo Han-koo has said that US tariffs on some advanced computing chips would have a limited impact on South Korean companies. However, South Korea's Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix are among the world's biggest memory chip producers. Request Mr. Kohli to join me back and start with his first comments.
Well, I think Samsung and SK Hynix, the kind of chips they supply, we should not forget that there's NVIDIA in the US who are making chips, but they are of different kind. So the chips coming from Samsung and SK Hynix, they complement the chips chips being made by NVIDIA. So it is US's need to have these chips. That's why South Korea is seeking a favorable deal. But I must tell you, Kriti, here at this point of time, that it's becoming harder and harder to deal with US because the unpredictability of the trade is so high that every country doesn't know what's going to happen tomorrow, because there's a different opinion expressed today, then tomorrow it changes, day after it changes, the situation changes. So there is no consistency. There is no stability when anyone is dealing with US these days. I think that is what is making these comments come from South Korea. And I'm sure it's on the minds of the South Korean leaders that they don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, even if they make them agree today for a favorable, I would say, tariff structure on the chips. Well, they don't know what President Trump may dislike, and he will say, fine, I'm going to impose another 10% tariffs. But the fact of the matter is that the way US is progressing on NVIDIA and the way US is progressing on artificial intelligence and related equipments, I think it will find very hard to do without the chips being imported from Samsung or SK Hynix. Even if TSMC in Taiwan is fulfilling the requirement to a certain extent, but the chips being made by SK Hynix and Samsung are unique and needed by AI data, a push which the US is giving to its industry.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, Mr. Kohli, for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on NewsX World. Moving ahead, viewers, there's some news now coming in from Greece. Now, a fire broke out near fuel storage facilities in Parama, west of Athens, in a densely populated area. The mayor of Parama says the flames rose as high as 20 meters along the main avenue, prompting authorities to issue a 112 emergency alert for residents. Firefighters rushed to the scene and managed to bring the blaze under control. Officials say the fire came dangerously close to fuel tanks located less than 500 meters from homes, which could have caused a massive explosion. Authorities continue to monitor the area to ensure the fire is fully extinguished and no further risks remain. And that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World. For all international news and updates.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want to be independent, they should be independent. We will not start a war against Greenland.
In the midst of this, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
We would have dealt with US a whole lot on trade and those kinds of things, and that's not as certain these days. So we have to go back and look at our European partners, our Asian partners.
An opportunity to exchange, to have a dialogue, to have a debate on a different perspective on finding the solution of the conflict.
First thing that is important to have a common ground, and that we do have with humanitarian laws and human rights, but also to say, okay, what does it mean for us as a country to act on these laws and how can we work together?
When we realize that there's something wrong with democracy, the institutions and policies, values come together and we take stock, and it's possible then to improve and chart a new course for democracy.
It's the people's right to self-determination, and if they want...
Trump announces Board of Peace members. American leaders dominate executive board. Palestinian groups object to Gaza governance plan. US threatens renewed conflict if Hamas doesn't disarm. Here is all about Trump's Gaza Board of Peace.
Hello, I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching another episode of Explained with me. Now today we discuss Trump's Gaza Board of Peace. As the plan to end the Gaza conflict enters its second phase, the White House has released the names of the members who will be part of the senior executive working with the US President Donald Trump's new Board of Peace. With Trump as the chair, the founding executive board will oversee the work of a committee of technocrats tasked with the temporary governance of Gaza and its reconstruction. Each member is expected to be in charge of a portfolio that will be critical to Gaza's stabilization, the White House has said, but it is not yet clear who will be responsible for which priorities. There will also be a separate Gaza Executive Board responsible for overseeing all on-the-ground work of yet another administrative group, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. Meanwhile, the Board of Peace is expected to sit above these two executive bodies and comprise a number of world leaders. No women and no Palestinians have been announced so far on the executive board, but the White House said additional members will be announced over the coming weeks. So who is on the executive board? Former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair had long been talked about as a potential member of Trump's Board of Peace, with the US President confirming back in September 2025 that he had expressed an interest in joining the body. The former Labour Party leader was the UK Prime Minister from 1997 to 2007 and took the country into the Iraq War in 2003, a decision which means some may view his presence on the board as controversial. After leaving office, he served as Middle East envoy for the Quartet of International Powers, the United Nations, European Union, US and Russia from 2007 to 2015. Blair is the only founding member of the executive board who is not a US citizen. He previously described Trump's plan for Gaza as the best chance of ending 2 years of war, misery and suffering. As US Secretary of State Marco Rubio is central to the Trump administration's approach to foreign policy. Before Trump's return to office, Rubio had spoken out against a ceasefire in Gaza, saying that he wanted Israel to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. But he has since praised the first phase of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire deal signed in October as the best and only plan. Also in October, Rubio criticized a move by the Israeli parliament towards annexation of the occupied West Bank. US Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, a real estate magnate and golf partner to Trump, will also serve on the Gaza Executive Board. Earlier this month, Witkoff announced the start of Phase 2 of Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza, adding that it would see the reconstruction and full demilitarization of Gaza, including the disarmament of Hamas. He added that he expects Hamas to comply fully with its obligations under the deal or face serious consequences. Witkoff has been a central figure in US-led efforts to negotiate a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine, including holding a 5-hour meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow in December. Then there's Jared Kushner, the US president's son-in-law, has also played a key role in Trump administration's foreign policy negotiations. Alongside Witkoff, Kushner has often worked as a US mediator for the Russia-Ukraine and Israel-Gaza wars, and he will now also serve on the Gaza Executive Board. In November, he met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to discuss key sticking points in the peace deal. Then there is a billionaire Mark Rowan, who is the CEO of Apollo Global Management, a large private equity firm headquartered in New York. Rowan he's been seen as a contender to become US Treasury Secretary for Trump's second term. He will also be a member of the Gaza Executive Board. And then we have Ajay Banga, who is the president of the World Bank. He's advised a number of senior US politicians, including President Barack Obama, during his lengthy career. Born in India in 1959, Banga became a US citizen in 2007 and later served as the CEO of MasterCard for more than a decade. Former US President Joe Biden nominated him to lead the World Bank in 2023. Robert Gabriel, a US National Security Advisor, will be the final member of the founding executive board. Gabriel has worked with Trump since his 2016 presidential campaign, shortly after which, according to PBS, he became a special assistant to Stephen Miller, another of Trump's key current advisors. The White House has also named a separate 11-member Gaza executive board to support the technocratic body, including Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, UN Middle East Peace Coordinator Sigrid Kaag, United Arab Emirates International Cooperation Minister Reem Al-Hashimi, and Israeli Cypriot billionaire Yakir Gabe. Meanwhile, Trump has also invited leaders of many nations to join the Board of Peace to oversee the post-war transition in Gaza. Leaders that confirmed to have been invited include Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama, Argentine President Javier Milei, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulidis, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and European Union official also stated that European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen had been invited to represent the European Union. Now, Israel has objected to the US announcement of members of the so-called Board of Peace, executive board appointed to lead the post-war Gaza. Meanwhile, the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad has criticized the composition of the board, saying it served Israel's interests. Now, it is not clear how the international force would ensure that Gaza is demilitarized. Hamas has not disbanded its battalions of armed fighters and has long regarded giving up all its weapons as tantamount to surrender, with armed struggle against Israel a crucial part of its ideology. Recently, Trump threatened Hamas with a renewed conflict if they did not disarm. The overwhelmingly American presence on the Board of Peace and the US military leadership of the international peacekeeping force that will occupy the Gaza Strip reflects Trump's strong hand in overseeing the ceasefire agreement and reconstruction plan for Gaza, the terms of which were largely dictated by his administration. And even as hundreds continue to be killed amid the fragile ceasefire, Trump has counted Gaza among a growing list of wars that he claims to have ended. When the United Nations Security Council approved Trump's peace plan, Russia and China said that they had been abstained from the vote because the United States had not provided more details on how the Board of Peace would function and whether it would establish a Palestinian state or not. The separation of powers and authority remains unclear among the executive board, the Gaza executive board, and a third panel of Palestinian technocrats who are expected to manage the day-to-day administration of the enclave's government. And the relationship between the three authorities, one dominated by Americans, a larger council with a broader international roster, and a third composed of Palestinians, is likely to be fraught with tensions over how exactly Gaza should be governed and rebuilt. The UN resolution authorized the Board of Peace to oversee Gaza at least until the end of 2027, while stipulating that the Palestinian enclave would be managed day to day by the panel of Palestinian technocrats, known as the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The Trump administration is expected to name the full panel headed by Mr. Shahad, a former Palestinian deputy minister for planning, in the coming days. For now, that's all for this episode of Explained. Stay tuned as we bring you more in-depth insights and stories that matter.
In the midst of death, life persists. In the midst of untruth, truth persists.
Hello and welcome to Deep Dive on NewsX World. I'm Kriti Mehta. Today we turn our lens to the Horn of Africa, where a feud over water, power and survival has pitted the ancient civilizations of Egypt and Ethiopia against one another. The battleground, the Nile River, where Ethiopia's Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, or GERD, is fueling tension to unprecedented levels. And our familiar mediator has re-entered the fray. On January 16, US President Donald Trump announced his intention to restart mediation between Cairo and Addis Ababa. In a letter to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, Trump declared that no state should unilaterally control the Nile. The Nile is the longest river in the world, serving 11 countries. But for Egypt, it is literally the artery of life. Cairo relies on the Nile for 97% of its water needs. Ethiopia, however, has built the GERD, Africa's largest hydroelectric project on the Blue Nile, which provides over 80% of the river's flow. Ethiopia sees the $4 billion dam as its ticket to prosperity, capable of doubling its electricity output and lifting millions out of poverty. So why the deadlock? Egypt calls the dam an existential threat. They fear that during times of drought, Ethiopia will hold back too much water, parching Egypt's farmlands and drinking supplies. Cairo demands a legally binding agreement on how much water is released downstream. Ethiopia, on the other hand, insists on its sovereign right to manage its resources. They argue the dam is for power generation, not water consumption, and that colonial-era treaties giving Egypt the lion's share of the water are no longer valid. Now the big question, why is Donald Trump so interested? Now this isn't Trump's first time stepping into the Nile waters. In 2020, during his first term, he led a mediation effort that ultimately collapsed when Ethiopia accused the US of siding with Egypt. Trump even stunned the world at the time by suggesting that Egypt might blow up the dam if no deal was reached. So why come back to it now in 2026? First, there might be the Nobel factor. Trump has repeatedly positioned himself as the world's ultimate deal maker. Solving a decade-long water war in Africa would be crowning jewel in his foreign policy legacy. Second, his relationship with President al-Sisi. Trump has previously called Sisi his favorite dictator and praised his recent role in mediating the Gaza ceasefire. By backing Egypt on the Nile, Trump strengthens a critical alliance in the Middle East. In his latest post, Trump has reframed the dam not as a weapon but as a regional utility. He suggests Ethiopia should give or sell excess electricity to Egypt and Sudan in exchange for guaranteed water flows. But is mediation even possible at this stage? In September 2025, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed formally inaugurated the dam. It is now a fait accompli. It is full, it's operational, and it's a point of intense national pride in Ethiopia. Meanwhile, Egypt is already struggling with water scarcity. Sudan, the third player in the triangle, is deep in its own internal conflicts, making regional coordination even more complex. So what's next? Trump's re-entry into the Nile dispute marks a shift back to pressure diplomacy. If he can convince Ethiopia to agree to a binding drought management plan, he averted a potential war. If not, his intervention might only deepen the rift between the nations of the Nile. For now, the river flows, but the tension remains at high tide. Joining me now in this discussion is Ali Mohammed Abushbak, who is a Middle East researcher, and he joins us from Cairo. Ali, thank you very much for joining me. Let's start with the first question. How pragmatic or fructifying, if at all, could Trump's Nile Peace Board proposal be in resolving the GERD dispute, given that we've seen past US mediation fail like in 2020?
Thank you, Kriti, for having me. And thanks, the information that you have informed about it, it's very crucial and very important about the relationship between Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, and Donald Trump. Usually, Donald Trump, he used to praise Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, and he considered him as a strong leader for Egypt and in the area. In fact, the role of Egypt in the region, it's very important for United States and for Donald Trump, in fact, because of the gap, I mean, the power vacuum in the region after the war in Gaza and after several of events happened. There is a power vacuum in the area, especially we are talking about Israel and the Abraham Accord. Up to now, there is no any progress about it. That's prohibited Israel to lead the region, Middle East. So he's looking for any leader to lead this area and to be one of the strongest man or strongest regime or power to fill this gap and to be one of the to be one of the who's handle this area. These things, I guess, Donald Trump, he thinks the appropriate person is Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, especially we are talking about Saudi Arabia, one of the strongest country economically and military in the region, but has a limited role in the area and couldn't find any mediating recently. It has no role in mediating the conflict between Israel and Gaza, also as Hezbollah. Saudi Arabia usually failed in filling this power vacuum, especially in Lebanon, try to interfere and try to enhance the situation in Lebanon, but up to now the situation in Lebanon is fragile. Turkey usually now it's not have any interesting about the Middle East. It's more looking for the international and to be as an international power instead of regional power. So also as we want to talk about Emirat, also Emirat has a significant issue and controversial issue about the role of Emirat in Sudan as well as in Yemen. So that's make it not appropriate choice for Donald Trump. This is
Right.
on one side. Another side, Donald Trump he want to be as a peacemaker.
Yeah.
According to recent poll in United States, most of the American, they are not happy and opposite the military action or military behavior in the Middle East or in internal, in foreign policy for United States. That's coming after the Donald Trump, what he has done in Venezuela and arresting Maduro. Most of the Americans, they are not happy and they are disagree this attitude and this kind of policy. Also, I guess using the military power against United States or America or Israel also enemy, that's make it most of the American audience not happy and not satisfied for them. there is also that economically United States nowadays it's unstable. There is a protest in United States. So Donald Trump, he's want to represent himself as a peacemaker.
Okay.
That's it. What he's trying to handle it, and he want to mediating the conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia.
Okay, Ali, now Egypt is also viewing the Nile as an existential resource. Will Trump's emphasis on broad guarantees for Cairo alienate Ethiopia, which prioritizes its right over its resources over fixed quotas?
Kriti thinks is both of them. Ethiopia is considered as a right for it to use a resource of Nile, as well as Egypt consider it as a security, as a national security matter for it. So usually Cairo used to rise up of the language and the escalation and saying that according to several of Egyptian military and the Egyptian representative, they used to think all the option is open, and one of the option is a military effort to hand over to end and closure this chapter of GERD. So the thing says Egypt consider it has a right, since the Nile River, it's one of the lifeline for drink and for the water and the significant sources for the water for Egypt. Especially we are talking about Egypt is a desert area, so has no resources for water except the Nile River. So if Ethiopia is going to do this faith for the dam, and that's impacting both Egypt and Sudan. And we are not talking about Sudan because Sudan has a several of internal conflict.
Yeah, let's talk about Sudan now, Ali. With Sudan's civil war sidelining it from talks, what role might the Technocratic Committee play in bridging the operational gaps on data sharing and flood management?
In my opinion, Sudan is not interesting now about the foreign conflict or about the clashes, speech clashes between Sudan and Ethiopia. It now has a significant, I guess, matter for them to tie their internal cases, especially after several of fight against the follower of Hamidati, and nowadays Sudanian army has a several of developed and also several of countries supporting the Sudanian army instead of Hamidati's forces. So I guess Sudan has a several of challenge nowadays, and in my opinion, Sudan can't be end this conflict very soon and very easily, since the fighting is still ongoing, and several of issue internal the community. We are talking about the economical damage collapse, the society collapse, the social life collapse. More than 8 million of Sudan immigrated from Sudan or flee from Sudan to another country, one of them Egypt. So now there is an empty place, a power vacuum in Sudan, as well as Sudan has a special cases. We are, because of the previous regime used to support Muslim Brotherhood, and now the new regime, it's not changed its policy, and up to now we are talking about South Sudan and North Sudan. That's make it more incredible, the situation, and fragile, in my opinion, in the conflict. And the technocrat government that it's talking about Sudan, it's not ready to handle all of this situation, as several of a challenge facing them. I'm not optimist about their success, as well as I'm not optimist about the ceasefire in Sudan or in the clashes in Sudan.
Okay.
We are more than 4 years they are fighting, and up to now there isn't no any crucial time to whom the victory. So since several of country interfere in Sudan, I will not mention countries who is supporting whom, because this is a very important question. Make it more incredible. Previously, also Libya, it was several of country interfere in Libya and supporting for some forces instead of the army in Libya. And up to now, there is a fragmentation in Libya, Benghazi, and other areas. Also, we are talking about Yemen. Several of countries interfere in Yemen and separated the government and separated Yemen to south and north. That's it. Also, the same scenario will happen to Sudan, as well as it will happen in case in Syria, in case Ahmad al-Sharh is not going to finish his duty and to make a security as a priority for him.
Okay, Ali, talking about the conflict at hand, Trump's letters also warned against military escalation. Now, with recent Egyptian naval drills and Ethiopian dam defenses, do you see the time is right for diplomacy to achieve the desired objective?
That's it. Donald Trump, he proposed his willingness to mediate the conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia. I guess that now Donald Trump, he realized the role of diplomacy in solve the issue in Middle East. Recently in Iran protest, we have seen how much Donald Trump, he escalated from it and raised his tone to wage a war against Iran. And yesterday he canceled his willingness to wage a war against Iran, because he believes in diplomacy way now after that the confirmation about the execution in Iran. They are refused to execute more than 800 of the protesters. So now Donald Trump, he realized the way of diplomacy to hand and to resolve the conflict in this area. In my opinion, Egypt as well as it's not ready for war against Ethiopia, and Ethiopia it's not. In my opinion, Ethiopia has no power to resist Egypt in case they are going to escalate the situation to turn to conflict or to harsh power instead of soft power. So this is I guess this is the language of Donald Trump term nowadays, and his policy now. He's going through the diplomatic in a state of conflict and military solution.
All right. Okay.
Then most of the American is not accepted American military intervention in Middle East.
All right, Ali. Thank you very much then for joining me in this discussion with your opinion. Viewers, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Deep Dive on NewsX World. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. With that, it's a wrap. Stay tuned to NewsX World for all international news and updates.
What we can do as the Interparliamentary Union to strengthen democracy, to promote human rights, to ensure that humanitarian law is respected.
UN Security Council needs a makeover, a comprehensive reform, and India deserves a position there, a role there.
Prime Minister Modi during Operation Sindoor made it amply clear that war has never been India's choice. We are with the side of peace. We are neither neutral nor indifferent. We are with peace.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. US President Donald Trump threatened escalating tariffs on key European allies unless the US is allowed to buy Greenland. Duties would start at 10% on February 1 and rise to 25% by June. European leaders rejected the demand, warning it could damage NATO unity, derail trade deals, and deepen transatlantic tensions. Syrian government forces advanced into Kurdish-held areas near the Euphrates, taking Tabqa and key dams despite US calls to stop. Kurdish-led SDF accused the army of violating a withdrawal deal and warned it would fight to hold remaining towns and oil fields. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei accused President Trump of fueling deadly protests that killed over 3,000 people. Khamenei called Trump a criminal, while Iran blamed the unrest on US and Israeli interference amid mass arrests and internet shutdowns. European Union and Mercosur leaders have signed the landmark free trade agreement in Paraguay after 25 years of negotiations, paving the way for what would become the European Union's largest ever trade deal. The accord covers the European Union with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, but still requires approval from the European Parliament. New York City Mayor Mamdani has appointed Tricia Shimamura as the city's new Parks Department Commissioner, tasking her with managing more than 30,000 acres of land. Mamdani praised Shimamura's decade-long record of public service, while Shimamura called the role an honor and vowed to make a difference. According to IMF statements, the International Monetary Fund has approved a $260 million disbursement for Ethiopia after completing the fourth review of its 48-month extended credit facility, bringing total IMF support under the program to just over $2.18 billion. Syria's communications minister Abdul Salman Haikal said that internet users can now access the Google Play Store without a VPN and that most Google services are expected to return to Syria soon. The restoration follows the removal of Syria from US Treasury's off-act sanctions list last year. According to a Department of Justice letter filed with Judge Paul Engelmeyer, the US Justice Department has urged a New York federal judge to reject lawmakers Rock Khanna and Thomas Massey's push for a special master to oversee the release of Jeffrey Epstein-related files. Alright viewers, let's start with the top news now coming in is from Greenland. Dutch Foreign Minister David Van Wiel has criticized US President Donald Trump's threat to impose tariffs on European allies unless they agreed to sell Greenland to the US. Van Wiel called the threat a blackmail, adding that it's unnecessary and damages the NATO alliance. Trump announced a 10% tariff on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Finland, and Great Britain, effective February 1. These countries have pledged to contribute personnel to NATO's Greenland mission. Van Wiel pointed out that the mission was about showing Europe's commitment to defending Greenland, and he opposed Trump linking it to trade demands. Trump has long insisted on full ownership of Greenland, citing its strategic importance and mineral resources. However, both Denmark and Greenland have made it clear that the island is not for sale, and people of Greenland do not want to join the US. Alright, I have Dr. Satoru Nagao, fellow at the Hudson Institute of Tokyo, joining me in this discussion. Thanks very much, Dr. Nagao, for joining me. Firstly, how do you react to the protests that are now growing in different parts of Europe on Trump's tariff threats if he does not get Greenland from Europe?
This problem has happened because of the two sides the perception. There is a gap. In the American side, under the Trump administration, Greenland is part of the American continent. This means that America's influential area, At least it should be. So that's why the defense and security matter is important, and China and Russia expanding influence, that is a concerning point. But to deal with China and Russia, America must lead this move, is America's idea. But in case of Europe, Europe has already had the Greenland, so that's why